All right, James Rosseau, welcome to the podcast, man. I'm
Hey,
excited to have you here.
thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And so to kick things off, I was wondering if you could just fill in our audience and just give them like a little bit of a background on what did life look like for little James growing up?
Oh man, for little James. Little James was man, where did I start? Little James wore glasses. That's like the first thing that comes to mind, man.
Nice.
The glasses was like the bane of my existence because I
Really?
felt
No
like
more
people
glasses.
because people bullied me with those glasses, right? And I
Yeah.
had like I had a lazy left eye, right?
Huh.
That was really lazy. And so the doctors in their infinite wisdom made me wear glasses with this patch on my right eye. And let me just say this to parents: never, I don't care what a doctor says, never let a doctor put a patch over your child's eye,
Yeah.
right? I
Like
mean, you
an
get all
actual
this.
patch, like a pirate.
Yeah, see what you just said. That's what they would say, like Captain Hook, so on and so forth, right? So kids would just
Oh,
like tease you at the club after school, the Boys and Girls Club, push you around.
goodness.
And then when you put the glasses on, they would take this little plastic thing that would flap over the glasses, right? Like an attachment thing that would flap over. So kids would just mess with me and push me around. And because the idea was if you cover the right eye, it'll make the left eye get stronger if it has to perform more, right? Did not work, Stu. So I wore these glasses, right? I would take the patch off and and
Man.
like every other kid, I'm larger size. I wanted to be on a football team and things like that. And it just
Yeah.
made things tough. So I think when I got to junior high school, I went to an out of neighborhood junior high school called Baldy Middle School and started to play a little sports. And man, I found out about contact lenses. It was like life changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was on the band. I played, all through elementary school. I played almost every brass instrument except like the sax. I played the trombone. I played the cornet.
Huh.
Everything. I was a mad xylophonist, and then my trumpet got stolen, and hip hop music was coming in, and
Huh.
I wanted to be a DJ. And I borrowed some friends' DJ. He went to college, borrowed his turntables, and over the summer worked a summer job. Got my
Huh.
first turntable of my own and started DJing parties and things like that, and started getting into that mix earlier
Yeah.
on. And two things happened. I think one, when I wanted to be a DJ, I went to my mom and asked her for some money, and she said, I'm not funding any more of your little hobbies that you start and stop, right? I'm not doing it. Like, you got to do
Yeah.
this yourself. And that was the best thing that could have happened to me. I mean, at the time I was stomping my foot and I was so upset, but it taught me the idea of delayed gratification and doing it for yourself and that you value it a lot more. So I
Right.
worked the whole summer and I worked at this hardware store around the corner from my house. And like, during the day, friends would run by the store and look in the window and laugh. And yeah, you work and we're going to the pool or we're going to do this and that. Or they were, come by the store and
Dang.
bounce the ball extra high so I could see it bounce in front of the window.
Yeah.
Right?
Rubbing it in your face.
Rub it in my face. But after that summer, I got my turntable and a needle because that's all I had enough money for. They were so expensive. And I was so happy. Right.
Yeah.
And I started DJing house parties, man. And I bought my first car while I was working there. As soon as I turned 16, I got a beat up like 73 Volkswagen Beetle, like
Love
fender
it.
falling off, no back window. And the owner of the store helped me fix it up. This guy named Joe Jankowski, who to this day, I just feel like I owe so much to if I ever see
Huh.
Joe. We put it in the back of the store parking area, and he would just help me fix it up, paint it, get it together, and I
Dang,
would
what a
go to
guy.
parties, right? So and then he helped me build this table that I could detach and pull apart to go to parties.
Oh.
So that way I could go to parties and have a table that no matter what the floor looked like, I can make it balanced because he helped me put these things on the bottom of the table to balance the table, right?
Oh. Like,
Right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like screw balancers and whatnot. I mean, you gotta think
Right.
this is back in the 80s, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
and so that throw all this stuff in my Beetle and Crater Records and some turntables, man, and like so that encapsulates my youth. And at the same time,
Yeah.
my mother and my father got divorced. Unfortunately, that was happening in the background. And then unfortunately too, my father he was an insurance man. When I grew up, he was a minister, preacher. My mother and father were from the South and moved up north in their wisdom when they were pregnant with me, and then
Yeah.
unfortunately got divorced and I went to move with my father for a while. That didn't work out as expected. Growing up, I just, never felt like I had my father's approval. I was like one of those kids. I came home with a 95 on my test. It felt like he was still like, why not 100?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
when I was living with him, he disappeared one day. Like just one day, just didn't come home. Another day passes by, doesn't come home. Third day passes by, doesn't come home. And it's just me, him, and my grandmother living together. And this is my second probably month of the high school year, my senior high school year.
Okay.
Finally, I stopped going to schools because I go, we got to pay the bills. And I asked Joe, can I work full time? He says, well, okay. And I do. I feel I don't make enough money to pay all the bills, right? So finally, I send my grandmother down south. I go move back in with my mom. Father never comes back home still.
Yeah.
Months pass by. And finally, I found him at a halfway house. He had a drug problem. And he says he's doing better. He's even elevated to be like a supervisor in his halfway house. And I say, great. Now, you would think I'd be mad and pissed off, but I'm still seeking his approval, right? This is the interesting thing about this.
Yeah, that is.
I then, I'm working at this time. I get out of high school. I'm working at like a hotel. I go to Temple for like a day or two because my financial aid falls through. I mean, these are like the valleys, right? My financial aid falls through at Temple. They boot me out. I wound up going to like Computer Learning Center. I'm working a job here. I'm working 3 jobs. I'm working like a parking lot job somewhere. I'm working at the Four Seasons Hotel overnight. And Four Seasons, people would leave stuff. So I would take them clothes to the halfway house. I would say, hey, here's some clothes people left and didn't take. And I go to see him a couple of times. He disappears again. Months go by. I get a call. He's in like a YMCA in New York. Now, again, from Philly to New York, I have no idea how he gets to New York. I go to New York. He's in a room with a little hot plate. Room's probably 4x4 room. I'm like, what's going on? I want him to see my son. I have a son by this time. I want to go see him again. He disappears again. I get a call from a nun who says, I think this is your father up here. Now, by this time, probably 9 months goes by or so. She says he's up here in this hospital in Brooklyn. I go up to the hospital. I take my son with me. When I get them to the hospital and check in to go see him, they say, your son can't go up with you. You can only go by yourself. I go, this doesn't sound great. Go upstairs, I get off on the floor. They tell me to put on plastic gloves. Wow, what is this about? Go to his room, I find out he's contracted HIV. And so this is, kind of the beginning of the end. So, a guy who's my size has contracted AIDS. He's, shriveling up. And the funniest thing, though, he says to me, this hospital food sucks. Can you go get me some Jamaican food, and all these different things. And I am still seeking his approval. And so, make a long story short, he passes away shortly after that. And the thing I remember most is you deal with those moments and you deal with all the things that happen, right? How to take care of all the expenses and the arrangements and all those things and make sure everybody's taken care of. And I think you focus on actually taking care of everyone else's needs during those times and not necessarily yourself. And during the funeral, I was totally good until the guy came and said, close the casket. And I lifted my hand up to close the casket, and that's when I fell apart. And it was like, it hit me at once that was it. I was not going to get his approval. The opportunity was gone. Right. That was it. Yeah. And when I closed it, fell apart. And from that moment on, took off into a lot of performance. I think, I just overperformed. Unconsciously, I was, I was in, say again?
So at this point, you're finally, I'm not going to get his approval. Did you ever close that loop of just like accepting that? Or was that what sent you into this, I'm not going to get his approval, so I got to seek someone else's approval? Or kind of where did that energy go?
Yeah, it went into work. And I wish I could say it was consciously. It took years later to realize that's
figure out all these things.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I'll tell you what that journey was like, because I certainly hope someone could peel something off of this in terms of what not to do. Please. Right. I went into work mode and unconsciously, I think, trying to prove out and validate for myself through accomplishments and seeing people go, yes, that's great. So I was in JPMorgan Chase. I remember when I got promoted to senior vice president. I think it was like 34. I was told, you're youngest senior vice president in the company's history. I think someone told me, right? And as a black man, few and far in between. I was in Delaware. I had more mentees than I can count. And, I always believe to whom much is given, much is required. Say no to no one, help everyone you can. And that's when I also think, if even before then, I always had this thing in my mind of special is not scalable. So people say, oh, you're special. You're making your way through. You're doing good things. Special is not scalable, though, right? We should all be able to go through the education system, even as practically as taxpayers, and have good things happen, right? Our gifts and talents be recognized and honed into things to meet our purpose, right? And it doesn't happen that way. And that's part of why I do what I do today. But going back into the story, I was going through all these things, knocking the ball out the park, knocking the leather off the ball in some cases. And then I finally hit a point where I had to acknowledge I'm doing these things for the wrong reason. And I went and I think I just had a couple moments where I kind of exploded or imploded that made me say, I need to sit down and talk to someone about this. I remember having this conversation with this psychologist, and he said, you have a lot of unresolved, I can't remember the words he used, whether it was anger or, seeking that validation. But he said something to me. He said, why don't you write a letter to your father? Why don't you try this as a process? So I wrote the first draft, and it was so funny. When I came back with the first draft, he looked at me and said, you even start this apologetically, like, sorry, we haven't talked in a while, something like that. He said, that's, you need to say what you really feel. So I wrote a second draft, and it opened more honestly. And I was getting ready to take a trip. My wife and I were going, I don't know, Barbados, some island. He said, here's what I want you to do. I need you to write this letter and put it in a bottle and ship it out to sea, believing that he gets it. And let that be a ceremonious moment for you of closure. It was really good.
Damn.
It was really good. Now, did it resolve everything? Absolutely not. Do I still miss them? Absolutely not. But did it take me 75%, 80% there? Definitely.
I love that.
Definitely.
So cool. Well, let's jump back then, because we just unpacked a massive amount there. I would love to jump back in. Part of your story I was listening to is like, initially you touched on it, like dropped out of high school. Yeah. And you're like, I'm going to go work. And I forget exactly what the details are, but there was a moment where someone that you met kind of gave you an opportunity to jump into the corporate world and to like, just like someone gave you a shot. And I guess I was curious if you could expand upon that a little bit. Like, how did this opportunity come? And then, really, how did you capitalize on it?
Yeah, I had a couple opportunities. I mean, the one was Joe, who gave me that summer job. That was through like the Boys and Girls Club. And again, I just wanted to make enough money to buy the turntables. Joe was like, right? But Joe was like a common MacGyver before MacGyver, right? He could fix anything. I mean, when I went in the hardware store, I thought there were like 4 or 5 things. We make keys, we sell some plumbing things, we sell some electronics, right? And so someone would come in the store with like a broken toaster, and I would go, no, we don't do that. And Joe way off from the back, bring it here. And I'm like, no, we don't do that though. We make keys, we do this stuff.
Yeah, and he like put 4 things.
He did 4 things. He'd like put it on the counter, and he would tinker with it and take it apart, and I would go, oh wow, that's interesting. And so he said to me one day, do you want to just kind of learn some of the things I do? I said, yeah, I'll learn anything. And so he just taught me fixing screens, fixing windows, silly putty, plumbing, electronics. And then he had part ownership in this security company installing alarm systems. So I would go hang out with these other guys who would install stuff, climbing through ceilings, putting in alarm systems. And so I think it just gave me a sense of, I guess the words we probably would use now is kind of interdisciplinary skills, right? How to go from one thing to the other and be agile, and how you think about, just applying things, right? And solving problems. Yeah. Just how to look at something and say, what can I pull out my toolkit to solve that problem?
Yeah. I think one thing that's really interesting, and this is something I hear all the time. I work with Tony Robbins. And like one of the things he says a lot of the times is that it's never a lack of resources. It's a lack of resourcefulness. And like, what a beautiful way to learn that in a hardware store where literally you're like, yes, we don't got it. But your friend Joe, he's like, no. If you're resourceful enough, exactly, we have the resources. We just got to be resourceful. And it's like, I think that's something that if we can have that trait, if we can develop that trait in our life, we can always open these different doors of opportunity. It's just about how do we be more resourceful.
Exactly.
And so let's jump a little forward then. So, you're doing this stuff with Joe, you're just getting creative and crafty. And
Yeah.
one actually small question I have too. The friends that used to bounce the ball in the window, did they end
Yeah.
up, would you give them rides in your car and they would come to the parties where you would DJ?
Oh yeah. Are you kidding?
That was
Absolutely. Come
probably the
on now.
best.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they would come to the parties, right? Maybe in the back of the room, and some of them rap, some of them dance, and some of them would just
Yeah.
nod their heads. You know,
You're like,
absolutely,
you see me, I see you, right?
absolutely.
Um, so let's jump forward then. So eventually you start doing stuff with Chase, JPMorgan, and
Right.
you go to a couple different companies, Allstate, then you were eventually with Legal Shield, and kind of like all these massive roles you were doing, like
Yeah.
vice
Yeah.
president, president at these companies, like you
Yeah.
are crushing it.
Yeah.
And one thing I would be curious is like, for someone that's listening to this and they're going, wow, I'm doing this thing in this company. And, one day I would love to be in a role like you were in, like a leadership role where you were like, you are the director of this ship.
Right.
What advice would you give someone on like how they can get from maybe starting in a company and doing a little bit to really growing into like an incredible position like you were in yourself?
Yeah. That's a great question. One, have an insatiable appetite for learning. Right. And, be a
Yeah.
sponge and consider the job description a suggestion, not an endpoint. Right. The job description is the way to get in the door, but it's not an endpoint, right? It's a
Yeah.
way to get inside and kind of place your bid. But some people see it as like the anchor. It's not the anchor. It's a bid placement, right? So
Yeah.
you're supposed to start a conversation. So I'll give you an example. When I started at Chase in 2000, I was head of payroll, and right after that, Chase merged with JPMorgan, and all kind of things happened during the merger. We moved from New York to Delaware, and things start to happen. And as soon as I would get over a growth curve, I would ask for the next thing. Like literally, as soon as I start, like I'm managing 60 people, I feel like I got it. I feel like the day's predictable. I would go to my boss and go, "What else is going on?" And she go, "Well, no, everything's under wraps." And I would hear in a management team meeting that the project's struggling over there. I go, "Well, what can I help?" "Well, you've got a team." "Yeah, but I think I could help there." And I would go try to help another partner of mine who's managing a contact center in Houston or things like that. And so next thing I know, a woman who's leading me is retiring. I get her group. I pick up a team of another 60 people and about 10 functions, everything from immigration services through retirement services and so on and so forth. And a year or two later, I'm managing, let's call it 30 functions and 200 people. And then the Bank One merger happens, and I am fortunate enough, blessed enough to succeed and pick that up. And I'm managing a team now, 400 people across 6-7 locations, and as well as some international responsibility. And I just keep asking for more stuff. I just keep saying I can do it. Right. We have a global problem with data management. I go, I think I can pull that together for, I thought it was 7 countries, and then I get it. We're like, it's really across 40 countries. Oh, okay. Yeah, I still think I could do it.
Yeah.
And
a
so,
key thing is you at the time of saying yes,
yeah,
you didn't entirely know how to do it. It sounds like your strategy was more so, let me say yes, and then I'm going to figure out how to do it.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think, and I think that's a part of the fun, right? I think one of the things about being on a growth curve is you don't know all of the answers and you won't have all of them, nor will you be the smartest person in the room. I think a part of being in leadership is getting people smarter than you in those different areas and being a facilitator of talent.
Yeah. I love that. So cool. Okay. So one quick thing I want to jump back into is you said you start working with Chase, you're managing all of payroll. And if I heard this correctly in the research I was doing, when you did that, you didn't even have your degree at the moment.
No.
Okay. So can you touch on that? Because I think one of the things in society, and it's starting to switch a little bit, is there's somewhat of a stigma that if you really want to do something in your life, you got to have this degree, you got to get the 4 years. And like you are point case in fact that if you're resourceful enough, if we go back to that, you don't need to have that. And so I'm curious, like, how did that kind of come about, and how did you get there without having a degree?
Yeah, so I would say it was one, uncomfortable, right? Not happy at times. Because remember, I went to Temple originally right out of high school, but my financial aid fell through, and we were right in this sliver. People call it this, I don't know, 5% or 10%, who my mother made too much to get grants, but not enough to get the loans. And so Temple said goodbye. I go to Computer Learning Center. I come out of there not necessarily wanting to be a programmer. I'm working at Today's Man at the time. I come out, I go downstairs, I sit a day or two with the programmers, and I go, I can't take sitting away from people in isolation like that. And so I continue working and saying, I'm going to figure out a way to do this. Now, I'm in my early 20s, and I just keep working. I go to a bank called Wilmington Savings Fund Society. They hire me as head of payroll and HR information systems. I'm leveraging my programming expertise to help the HR team who know HR policies and things like that, but don't really know the system aspects.
Right.
So I'm using my payroll experience, but I'm using this fresh knowledge of how to put data together. Totally. And they are ecstatic that somebody can run reports, put data cubes together, right? The financial guys upstairs is not, who hates HR today are going, somebody down there speaks a language, right? So I become ambassador to nations, right? And that helps. And this is back to the point of solving problems. So at that point, people care less about the degree and more about that you're solving the problem. So I do that for a while. And I go from there to Chase, the same thing. Chase was in the middle of doing an upgrade from Genesis to PeopleSoft. I had, when I left Wilmington Savings Fund Society, I went and became a PeopleSoft consultant for about 2 years. And so they needed someone who understood the dollars, but also understood the systems enough. So when I got the call, I had just actually accepted a job at ADP, and the person called me and said, hey, listen, we need someone who understands this. And I said, I just took this other gig. They said, no, you at least come talk to us. And I went, and it was worth it. And same thing, didn't care about the degree. Can you solve the problem? And so I did that. And I started feeling like I still want the degree. I finished the degree when I was when I was 33, 34. Finished it online, right? And it was the same year I got promoted to senior vice president. It just happened to be the same year.
Right.
Yeah. And same thing. And then several years later, I decided I wanted my, MBA. And so I finished that in 2015. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's a good point. I think you bring up too, that I think sometimes we see a degree as it is something that can help open a door.
Right.
Right. But if you don't have it, you just have to be more resourceful to open that door. But at the end of the day, once that door is opened, the degree, it's not about the degree really, right? It's about, can you solve the problem? Can you do the task? Can you get the thing done? And at that point, they could care less if you have a degree, if you dropped out of high school, they could care less whatever you do, as long as you're getting the task done at hand, you're going to continue to grow in that role.
Exactly.
So,
and I'll tell you, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go.
I was going to say, people would say to me, why you're investing the time to go back, both on the bachelor's and the MBA. And the best way I could explain it is I don't think either path sequentially beats the other. I think there are just pros and cons and trade-offs, right? But I will tell you why I like both. When you're learning you are learning other people's ways of doing it, right? What you get out of a degree and things such as that is you get frameworks and models, right? But if you do the frameworks and models without any practical application, right, it's like being in the lab and never getting out on the road. So when you bring the two together, right? So I found going back and get degrees, I go, oh, this is why they arrived at doing it this way. But it allowed me to zoom out and go, but there are other ways. Right. And same thing, I thought long and hard before I went back to get my MBA, knowing how much time that would take. And actually it was one of the conversations that helped me a lot was meeting Jamie Dimon, right? The CEO and chairman at JPMorgan Chase. And I had time with Jamie and I asked him his thoughts. And not like I met with Jamie often. I only met with Jamie one time, literally. And we spent 40 minutes. And he said one thing to me. He said, listen, you have the time, right? We all do. Put down the clicker and figure it out. He said, I'll tell you this. You have a great and stellar career here. All this is going to do is up your ante in your tool set. So it's just a question of, do you want a broader tool set, period? Yeah. And my answer was absolutely. Why wouldn't I want a broader tool set?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So let's say we jump forward then. So you're doing this, eventually Allstate, go to Legal Shield. And one part that I really want to touch on, and you and I talked about this on your podcast as well, that I thought was really interesting, is you've basically made this shift from corporate to now doing stuff with your nonprofit, to doing stuff with CoreLink Solutions, and really putting emphasis on that. And can you kind of explain that transition to us? Because for, I think, many people listening to this, they go, okay, you're the president of all these different companies. You are crushing it financially. You're doing great. Like, you're leading a team. There's all these incredible things, but you decided to say, I'm going to go in this other direction. Can you just explain that? Because that's, I think most people would be curious why you did that.
Yeah. And so it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. We decided a long time ago. I remember probably back in late 2000s or before that, when we were starting to do well. I think when we got our first and second bonus, we paid off our first home, right?
Nice.
We like biblical beliefs of, owe no man if you can, right? We just wanted to pay it off and be done. And a lot of my friends around me, were buying bigger homes, right? Because you could afford it. And I said, no, I like not having debt. Like, that feels good.
Sure.
And so we always felt like we were preparing to be free in order to be able to give back, right? And so leaving Chase in and of itself was hard because I had been there 11 years. It was a great role to go be president of a new division at Allstate and create something new. But I also felt like we were on this journey to figure out a way to exit corporate in order to give back. And my whole idea of giving back was, again, a real simple one. When I grew up in North Philadelphia, in the area I grew up in, again, when I pull out a map, let me start here. When I told people why I was leaving Legal Shield to start a new company, I think anytime you leave a place, people are trying to understand, are you running from or running to? And I didn't want people to think I was running from. I wanted them to understand what I was running to. And I put a map on the screen to show them what I'm running to. I'm running to solve a big problem. And here's the big problem, how I can describe it. Today, most areas like I grew up in over-index in terms of the number of people with two problems. One, failure in math, reading, and science comprehension and scoring coming out of high school, okay? And over-index relative to prison population. And I put the map up to show them the high schools in those areas and their failure rates in math, reading, and science. And it gets worse for the Black population, right? Less than 50% have math, reading, and science comprehension. And then when you overlay the map of the prison population, over-index in a major way, right? Then this gets compounded by how prisons are built. In most cities and states, the marker number for forecasting prison builds starts at 6th or 8th grade scoring on math, reading, and science. So you have a kind of perpetuated cycle. I was in a city, I don't want to mention the mayor, but I was having lunch with a mayor working on B2B when I was at Legal Shield, and that mayor turned to me and said, oh, no, it's not 5th or 8th grade here, we do it at 2nd grade. So if it's in 2nd grade, you haven't made it. The prisons are allowed to use those numbers to forecast the number of beds they're going to need 10 years from now.
Jesus.
Right. So I said, my thing is, I want to figure out how to go disrupt that by improving either the education system directly or something we can put in place. And keywords I use are, how do we increase self-efficacy? How do we increase the ability for children to think of themselves differently, care differently? We've all seen it when we look in a child's eyes, and that child, you can tell that child really doesn't care about themselves. They don't believe they're going anywhere, and so on and so forth. How do we give them that sense of belief? How do we give them a sense that they were purposed to do something, that they have natural skills and talents? How do we tell them the superhero story, right? I always say there's 4 factors, right? Again, every superhero has powers. They fall into them. They goof around with them for a second. They then figure out why they were built to use them. And they have a guide like a Yoda who shows them how to use them. And then they go on purpose and use those skills, right? They need a Yoda though, right? And so how do we build a program? And that's what I want to do. And so when I explained that to everyone in the room, they go, got it. You're not running from, that's what you're running to. And so during the 2010 period forward, I was figuring out, how do I free myself up to go do that? And that's what it was like. So when I left Allstate to go to Legal Shield, that was purposeful. One, because Legal Shield had a mission that was very much like my own in terms of, providing people a different level of freedom, but it was also my chance to do something in private equity, which hopefully would give me a moment to add a little more to my till, right? My war chest, to be able to then leave and do what I want to do. And so now I spend almost half my time leading a nonprofit and the other half doing some executive coaching with
Yeah.
C-suite leaders who want to not only build their company internally, but also do some social good.
Right. Love it. Dang, that's some crazy stuff to shed a light on.
Yeah.
That's powerful work. So
It's
I
sobering
appreciate you.
too, right?
It is. It's yeah, it's just insane. It's crazy. So that's beautiful work you're doing. So
Thank you. Thank
um
you.
absolutely. And so James, one thing I would be curious, people want to get more info about you, see what you're up to, where can they find you and everything you're doing?
Absolutely. Go to the CoreLinkSolution.com. When you go across the top, you can go to the podcast and check out what's going on in here, who I'm talking to and why, and you can see the online course that's there. I would implore you to look at the online course, because if you go through the online course, that helps you. A percentage of those proceeds go to really delivering the course that I talk about to youth. We're right in the middle of that right now, getting that course out to youth, whether it's through schools or through other civic organizations, facilitators, churches, you name it. We're actively working to deploy that. And if you are someone who wants that, you'll see a button there where you can indicate your interest, and we'll get back to you to
Yeah.
help you deploy it.
Love it. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And one last question I got for you, James, before we let you run is, and we ask every guest this, is, we're all about helping people find direction in their life, but we're all about through doing it through execution, right? Not
Hmm.
just sitting on a couch going, this is what I want to create, but we got to go out there and do stuff. And
Absolutely.
so one thing I would be curious is, what would you say is one thing someone listening to this can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction in their life?
That's good. Right. Take inventory of the things that you do well naturally without trying. And then maybe in the next column, write down what you think it would look like if you actually try hard.
Mm, I like that. Simple and profound. Awesome, awesome. Well,
Yeah.
James, it's been an honor to have you here, man. Again, your story has been just a pleasure to dive into. So thank you for living the life that you've lived and being yourself. And
Thank you.
thank you so much for being on here today, man. I
Good
appreciate
to
it.
see you again, man. Thank you.
Good to see you too.